live. Okay, we got a lot to cover. It's been a big week.
Did you cover the budget with Gary? Good.
We covered the budget with
You got it
Gary.
all settled and it's all good?
Right. We've got three big issues to talk about.
Okay.
We've got Uber.
Okay.
We've got really, I think, one of the biggest things ever in business.
Oh my goodness. Bam.
Amazon and Whole Foods. And also a little bit about Commerce Corporation, what's going on over there. Why don't we sit that one in the middle? Let's start with Uber. We probably started talking about Uber about 2 months ago on a regular basis. You know, a transformative company changing transportation in the United States. You know, probably 3 days a week I take it back and forth to the office. You know, people don't buy cars anymore because of Uber, changing everything, but they have this little issue with a very expressive CEO.
A little issue.
And also a little cultural issue, broken, really de facto broken by a young woman who had left the company and wrote a blog post outlining pretty much with great detail the culture of sexual harassment in the office place that started literally her first day at her first meeting.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about it.
Well, I mean, that unleashed something that we've been beginning to hear all along, that as innovative as Uber is, and it is brilliant. I mean, it makes getting from point A to point B easier. We all use it. I love using it, but as the story started to come out about the culture and the workplace and the innuendo around sexual harassment that turned out to be more than just innuendo, and they didn't help themselves, I think really contrasts the days where if you were successful in making a lot of money and your shareholders were happy, that you could get away with that. You know, this bad boy culture. And I believe that we are now in an era, thank goodness, where it's not good enough to just be successful and make money for your stakeholders and your shareholders. You actually have to create a work environment that isn't besieged with claims of sexual harassment, you know, that seem to have some fact behind them.
Right.
And as that started to move out, I was one of the first ones to say, not today. I don't care how successful, I don't care how wealthy you are, in a world where you have Twitter and Facebook and you can communicate with all of your friends. I
Live on video.
And so the news about and the context for how all of your advertisers, investors, and partners, you know, have to be able to stand behind how you do business are here. And so what we saw was the Travis Kalanick, and we're going to talk about Amazon and Jeff Bezos. What a great contrast, right? Both disruptors, both innovators, both solving a real world problem and creating a lot of value. One doing it in a hardworking, hard-nosed, but ethical way, and one not so much. And Travis Kalanick is now on indefinite leave. We'll see whether he comes back, but they are rudderless now. So there's a committee running this.
Yeah, it seems absolutely incoherent as to what their strategy is. Let's talk about that a little bit. We've seen some dynamic CEOs leave some companies that they helped build. Steve Jobs won, right? That when Steve Jobs left, that company did not perform particularly well. It might have been on the downward ramp when he left. But it went from a slow decline to a fall off the table decline, which I think Microsoft had to functionally keep them alive at one point, take a position with the company. But are we ever going to see him back? That's question number one. Will he come back cleansed, you know, went to the treatment center in some Arizona town, and he's back and better than ever, and goes on Oprah or comes on with Molly and talks about how he's a newfound person.
I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't come back, given what we've already talked about. He is clearly going to try, you know, to recuperate his image and recuperate himself as the nominal leader of this, regardless of how much stock he owns. I mean, he has a lot of influence, obviously, in the governance of this thing because of the way they set up the IPO and the shares of stock and how much he owns and controls. So I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't come back. I think some of these things have a way of transitioning to different and new leadership. I wouldn't be surprised if he tried to come back, but I don't think just rhetoric and saying, I went to rehab, and I came back.
Right.
And now I'm completely different, and we're going to treat
Well, and
women
it-
completely differently in the workforce. I think it's a tough road for him to haul, and if you're on that board of directors,
But most
you're
of those
gonna be-
guys on that board of directors were probably put there by him.
Yeah, well, Ariana Huffington is one of the newer folks
Right.
on their board of directors. And there's an article out there today that I read that says she is starting to have more and more influence
Yep.
on the board
Right.
and what happens. And so it's not going to be an easy path back for him if he comes
Yep.
back, let's put it that way.
Yep. If he doesn't come back,
Yep.
will that company have the same energy, innovation, ability to just constantly advance? And fearless. They took on governments.
Right.
They took on
Right.
law enforcement. They took on national security agencies. They took on international trade organizations, and pretty much in most cases ran them over.
Yeah, well.
And asked questions afterwards, and then said sorry.
To me, conflating that with sexual harassment in the workplace doesn't wash anymore.
Yeah.
Being hard-nosed, being clear, taking some risks, really pushing stakeholders and governments hard, on behalf of
Well, let me
citizens.
give you an example.
That's okay.
Portland, Oregon wanted Uber. The
Right.
government of Portland, Oregon didn't want Uber.
Right.
Uber started operating.
Right.
People took them. It's very, very strong taxi lobby owned by two
Right.
major taxi groups owned by very prominent, very, very prominent Portland business interests. And they jammed that thing through, spent a lot of money on lobbyists, very influential, and they ran that thing right through.
Yeah, but here's a counterexample. I
Sure.
was just in Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about a place that's positioned as an innovator. Keep Austin weird.
Yeah.
South by Southwest is there.
Sure.
They don't have Uber. And let me tell you about the experience of coming into Austin.
Sure.
Right. There's a lot of things I love about Austin. I will tell you one of them that I don't love: the lack of transportation options to get from point A to point B. Because as someone who travels an awful lot, I'm sitting in Austin and I couldn't get at one of these ride sharing
Yeah.
kind of platforms, and it was a pain in the what
Yeah.
to get around. So in the end, you have to balance what's good for the community, what's good for the citizens, what positions you as an innovator. But you're going to have multiple choices. That's the key, right? They're not going to be the only company in the ride sharing business. They have a huge lead right now. A huge lead. And so I think this is
So
why.
let me ask you a question. Why don't we ever see Lyft seem to be able to
Yeah.
get it going?
Well, I
right?
think Lyft is growing. I think Lyft is trying to take advantage of the situation that Uber's in right now. I think this is part
You
of
don't
the board.
see
This
it,
is
you
part
don't
of why the
feel it.
board.
Maybe it's different in other regions in the
Well,
country.
because they had such a lead, right? Uber had such a first mover advantage.
Yeah.
It's got so many of us have the app, and we're lazy.
Yeah.
We put one app on our phone, we get used to that service, and then even if it's as easy as downloading another app,
Right.
we don't do it. There's a lot of stickiness to this, which is why the first mover advantage in innovating is so important. But it won't last long, which is why I think they'll put a new leadership team in place, which is why I'm going to bet that you're not going to see Travis Kalanick back, in a hands-on operating.
Will you see a rock star as
Right.
the CEO? Will
Yeah,
they go
well-
out and recruit a named,
course they-
high level, top level, average
Well,
family at home
let's
knows
just
who
say
it
they
is?
have a few bucks in the bank.
Yeah.
And they can afford whatever CEO they want to get, but they're going to have to convince the CEO. Imagine the conversation
Yeah.
of trying to recruit that top name CEO. What's going to happen with Travis Kalanick?
Right.
Like, what role is he going to play? That's going to all get ironed out long before they ever recruit and take in, unless they're going to put some interim person in there, which is a different caliber person, maybe somebody from inside. That I think we should watch that. Let's see what they do in terms of putting in place the leadership that they need in order to continue to build on this and take it to the next level. And I'm going to bet that they'll put new leadership in, and that we'll see Travis play. Maybe he's got some role. They can't take away what he built. They can't take
Right.
away what that's worth. Lord knows he'll have enough money to do whatever he wants to do.
Right.
But I think taking the reins back at Uber is going to be problematic.
Let's go to Amazon and
Okay.
Whole Foods. Friday morning at about
Oh my goodness.
7:30, 8 o'clock, whatever it was, word hit the street that for $13.7 billion, Amazon was going to acquire Whole Foods. So they functionally purchased 440 of the best retail real estate around
Right.
the most affluent consumers
Right.
in the United States.
Right.
A company that had been long time littered with critiques of poor management or ineffective management,
Right.
that couldn't kind of get into the next gear and really explode.
Yeah.
Absolute game changer is best. It reminded me of the day the iPhone came out in 2007, of just one of these
Yep.
holy schmolies, and the implications
Huge.
are profound, not just against Walmart and Stop and Shop and the others. If people are thinking about that's the only
Right.
place they're going to affect, forget it.
Oh.
And we're losing tens of thousands of jobs in the retail industry per quarter now.
Right.
I mean, can you imagine being the poor guy who's running Sears right now, waking up?
Anybody who's trying to sell anything to anybody.
Right.
When that Amazon news came across the wire, when I tell you it has been nonstop conversations at BIF and out in the marketplace, right? Organizations and industries that you wouldn't think would be affected at all are, what does this mean for us?
Yeah.
And the takeaway at the highest level, is this example. You know how I talk about don't wait until you're Netflixed to innovate? Well, maybe
One
we
of my
want to
favorite
talk about,
columns.
well, maybe we want to take the word Amazon and turn it into a verb.
Yeah.
Because everybody, and we can talk locally about some players
yeah.
Here locally, was what does this mean for us? And I think one of the major things we should talk about that gets missed here is too many of us think that this is an either or. Either you're an online platform or you have a physical store presence, right? And that those are two different industries. That what you're about to see is going to be brilliant, because one thing that Jeff Bezos will do is he will experiment his way there at
Yeah.
an incredible scale. And this isn't about, here's our bricks and mortar retail business, Whole Foods, and,
Well, and
here's our
simultaneously.
online presence. They're going to put the two into one business model, and they're going to be all about customer experience and the profitability of that customer experience. And if they've got a cohort of customers that want to touch and feel their produce, you can bet you're going to have lots of places to go touch and feel your produce before you bring it home, or to make sure that you have healthy choices and you're getting healthy options when you're putting together the food you serve to your family and to your kids. He will blend online and physical in a way that the bricks and mortar industry never even dreamed of.
It may
That's
be
what's
a
gonna
photo
happen.
online of the exact kumquat
Yep.
you are purchasing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
With the history of with the online pedigree of where was
Right.
that kumquat farmed, who was the farmer that did it, with the storytelling assets.
Yeah, right.
See, this isn't about we need to buy the bricks and mortar so that we can shut it down and harvest it for more online sales. This is about how do we own the shopping experience, and what's the blend of times where I need to go physically into a store, and what value does it add
Let me ask you a
versus what
question.
value I create by selling something to someone online. And a lot of people are missing this point because they see it as you have to be one or the other. It's not true.
But could he create two Americas,
Right.
right? Could he create the Amazon middle-class, upscale consumer, highly educated, highly discretionary, makes smart choices, and they're there already, they're on Amazon
Yep.
Prime, they've got a deep relationship with that brand, they're already buying 20 to 100 times a year, they already shop at Whole Foods,
Right.
with a reputation as being one of the most expensive food retailers in
Right.
the country. And then, listen, I don't care. I don't care about, yes, they take EBT cards, but I don't care about that other consumer who doesn't want to buy my pomegranate for $4.
Yeah. I don't believe that's why he bought this. I believe there's some low-hanging fruit. And yes, we can talk about like what the near-term impact is of Amazon owning Whole Food, and what are the easy to think things that they can do in a Whole Food store that improve the shopping experience, get access to lower cost goods. I don't believe in the end that's why they bought it. I think he bought it because he imagines Amazon being the king of every time we buy and sell anything, whether it's food.
So when's
or
the-
just-
you
and
saw
they're going to
today-
change the model.
So you saw today that the two big sports and gaming companies, DraftKings and The other got shot down by the Federal Trade
Yep.
Commission
Yep.
and said, hey, listen, no go, you control 90% of the space. When does
That's a good question.
the FTC start to
Well,
step
I
in?
think it's a very good question because the FTC tends to think about it the same way we do, in narrow industry verticals and control or dominance of a narrow industry vertical, where the game that Jeff Bezos is playing is changing the entire model, blending these capabilities, which he's going to do now in the food space, and it scares the you-know-what out of anybody who touches that business, right?
Okay, but
then,
here's the
but then
pressure.
your question, just
But
to
it-
get
but-
to your question about at what point does this become some kind of antitrust issue, and how big do we allow these companies to get, right? And what does that mean for access at a competitive price when there's not much competition left?
Right.
So I do think you're going to see them get much smarter about how they play the government game, how they play that game. I think that's a fair point. But in the interim, when I'll tell you, if you are in the food retail business today, did you see what, I'm sure you did,
Oh,
because
yeah.
you watched
The-
this.
the stock
Their
fall.
stock price went up at Amazon, and the industry stock price went down. They got Whole Foods for free,
Yeah.
right? Literally at
Yeah.
no cost.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
And his net worth, he jumped today to the number 2 richest person in the world, right? Behind Bill Gates, right? And so, like, literally, just a strategy that is
A 4-day
disruptive,
strategy.
right? To innovate and think differently than these narrow swim lanes and how we compete
Yeah.
is changing the entire world.
Yeah.
So now let's come local. Let's talk about what this means local. I've been following it because I was in office working leading the EDC when we went to American Locomotive Works and we welcomed United Natural Foods, UNFI, to Rhode Island, which was a big win.
Big win.
They've grown since they've been here. They sell into, their distributor that sells into this natural foods market. Whole Foods is a really big customer for them.
Huge.
So you can imagine
Their stock-
like their stock took a hit.
beating.
It took a beating, but let's think beyond the daily stock price, right? How do you, if you're a distributor like UNFI that employs a lot of Rhode Islanders, how do you innovate and play that game? And distributors are not the folks you normally think of as being innovative, right? They put more technology in to manage the distribution and shipment, the pick, pack, and ship, the order entry, and all that stuff. But their business model,
No.
playing the value game in a completely different way, that's really hard for a lot of distributors to do. And you're going to see distributors that are disrupted. You're going to see the
Well,
retailers
think about
that are
this,
disrupted.
down the road in Fall River,
Yeah.
there's 1,800 people working at an Amazon
Oh,
warehouse.
I know. Those are the jobs.
Yeah, I
Those-
mean, that,
Those are the jobs that are sitting in a very large distribution center. And believe me, they love in southeastern Mass being the winner and getting that center.
Yeah.
They love those jobs. They're really good paying jobs.
Yeah.
But the truth is, that you know how many square feet that distribution center is compared to the number of jobs? You know how much land it took
Oh, yeah,
to
it's
put up that
unbelievable.
distribution center
Right.
for that handful of jobs?
Right.
I mean, I'm sure they're thankful to have them.
and listen, there are gonna be more robots and more automation in
Absolutely.
that building.
No, absolutely.
I can't remember the number, the size of the Gillette plant up in Boston, outside of Boston, is some massive
Right.
footprint, and the number of actual people is
Right.
tiny because it's all robot driven.
Well, from an economic development standpoint, from a job standpoint, from an education standpoint of how do we play in this 21st century economy, you and I have been talking for a long time about we better get out ahead of this. Because if we're just sitting here reacting to all these changes, we're going to lose.
Right.
We have to play offense. The companies here have to play offense. They can't just wait for Jeff Bezos to make us play, right? You have to innovate all the time, not just your products and services, but your entire business model, because I can tell you that's what Jeff Bezos is doing, and that's why he's now the second wealthiest person in the world. And let's go back to the Uber conversation for just a second. He's not Travis Kalanick,
Yeah.
right? He pays a lot of attention to culture. You know, the truth is about Whole Foods, you
Yeah.
described it based on, the way they were managed. They're a cult. They have passionate employees that feel
Right.
like they're on a mission to bring healthy food, to citizens and to families, right? I've seen Jeff Bezos because I watched him purchase Amazon, which was run by my friend Tony Hsieh. right? And I watched him buy Zappos,
Mm-hmm.
right? And same kind of thing. What Tony Hsieh had done at Zappos was he created passion-based team. The culture is amazing
Right.
there, right? Very high on culture and people that want to work there, that feel like they're doing something important for society.
Right.
Right? Think about Whole Foods. It's even easier. They're not selling shoes.
Right.
Right? You know, they're selling nutritious food that they believe is the right thing to help more families be able to access. You bring Amazon's know-how and capability set to be able to get those prices down to where, to your point before, this isn't just about serving the
Oh,
upscale.
100%.
This is going to be about the food supply chain for everybody at much healthier foods at lower price points, and good luck for the traditional retailers to be able to compete with that.
Well, not only that, but obviously one of the ramifications of the announcement is those Whole Foods workers who are passionate and cult-like are now petrified about the future of their jobs.
No, because
Yeah.
what they're sitting there thinking is, what is this technology going to mean for my jobs? I'm going to tell you, because I watched what they did with Zappos,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think what they're going to do with Whole Foods, this thing is more strategic. This isn't your classic Jeff Bezos bought it, you know, because he saw value in consolidating costs. Right? Like, no, this is a game-changing play. This was a strong signal over the bow, not just to the folks in the food business, right? This, I mean, you don't think the folks in the retail drug business, you know, kind of watched that with great interest last week?
So let's
and
talk
said,
about that.
Like, wait a minute, what's going to happen when he shifts his sights over to, you know, the wars in the pharmacy
So do you
business?
think that they're having a discussion about that deal up at CVS in Woonsocket?
Let's just say, I believe that they are, and you know that they are as well. Of course they are. They're in the retail business, and they're in a piece of the retail business that has been more protected than others.
Right.
It wasn't the first one, like books.
Yeah.
Right. You know, and now they're going after food. Right. If you don't think most of the stuff that we buy in a pharmacy, you know, is vulnerable to being accessed and distributed and sold in a completely different way. If you're in any retail business, that news went right away to the executive suite, you know, and they might be at the golf tournament today, but I will guarantee you their phone's ringing. People are working really hard around what does this mean for us? How do we accelerate our path to innovation and changing the customer experience so we don't get Amazon?
Yeah.
Right.
So now the other, and on a lesser degree, a number of media influencers think that this is also an indication that he may take his platform, which is outside his ownership of Amazon, it's personal, of taking the Washington Post and potentially
Oh, yeah.
playing that out.
Forget the media
across
business.
the
Yeah, so
board.
of course you watched that. Did you see that the guy who was the CEO, the founding CEO, who led that passion-based, you know, kind of mission, you know, to make us more nutrition and eat healthy foods?
Right.
Right. Did you see how they treated him? I read today that guy got a role in this deal.
Yeah.
Never mind all the money.
Right.
Got a, which I'm sure isn't bad, got a role at the Washington Post, which is
Right.
owned by Jeff
Jeff
Bezos, as a platform to be a chief advocate, right, for healthy foods and healthy living. They put him immediately down at the Washington
But couldn't
Post.
the ultimate irony be that Donald Trump does one thing before he leaves office, which is to get the FTC to crack down on Jeff Bezos
Yeah.
before
Well,
he can
well,
pull off these?
You can't resist. You got to bring the president back into this. But we do know from the campaign that healthy foods and healthy living is not it's not high on the list of the president.
Or many of the presidents. The last president may have eaten healthy, but he also smoked. So
Right. Right.
It's not a low-stress job. Last thing, we've only got a few minutes.
Okay.
We had a piece today. We took all the data. It took us a while to get it from Commerce Corporation of the contracts that they've let out. They've let out about, last 2 years, about $12 million in business out to ad agencies, research firms, D&B, Porta-Johns for the Volvo race, you name it, $12 million.
You're in the weeds.
Yeah.
You're in the budget weeds.
2/3 of it goes to out-of-state firms. More
Yeah.
money was spent in New York City
Yeah.
by the Commerce Corporation than spent in Rhode Island as a whole.
Yeah.
Seems to be a little bit of a misalignment of we're here to build jobs in Rhode Island and tapping out on a consistent basis to firms Some of them clearly could only be done out of state, but many of the dollars looks like it could have been spent in state.
Yeah, well, first, before, okay, we can talk about how they source what they need and what the new budget reality means in terms of where they're gonna go to get the access to the technology, the support, the
Sure.
tools that they need. And we can debate, like, how much of that should come from the local market versus, we should selectively be looking for folks who can help us.
Right.
In the end, what really matters most is that we reposition our economy to create higher wage jobs, right? So it's not a share-taking game. And so sometimes I think those arguments are a little overblown about how come you didn't use this ad agency versus that ad agency. I think more importantly is how did you use the dollars, the taxpayer dollars, to change our economic positioning to produce more jobs for all of us? So I would rather.
Well, and also isn't it a
as
performance
opposed to-
issue,
yeah,
right? We go to New York to hire Milton Glaser
Yeah.
for a logo that any person on the street reacted to adversely. And over there, down the street,
Right.
is Malcolm Greer, arguably one of the that office is, now he's
Yeah.
passed away, but that
But
office is
but
one
I
of the most
believe, again,
famous
I will,
design
on
firms.
this issue, and I know we push on this pretty hard. Yeah, can we take a first look at the talent in our own backyard?
Right.
And can we make better use of our own talent to help make this place stronger and in a more engaged way? Of course we can and we should,
Yeah.
right? It shouldn't be our first instinct to say, there's nobody good or good enough here
Right.
locally. The first instinct should be, what do we have here? How do we leverage that? How do we together make the place stronger? But again, I'm going to say to you, it is far more important that we get the access to the best capability wherever it comes from
Right.
to make Rhode Islanders' lives better, to create more economic opportunity for Rhode Islanders. And I would want to give leaders more leeway, right, on go get us the best capability we can get at, take a look locally, but if there's someone outside who can help make Rhode Island better, by all means, bring them in. Like, I think that that's fine. This budget thing that I'm sure you and Gary went through, I have to say, to me, like, thank God I'm not in that now, because I remember for multiple years, this was the worst week of the year, right? Waiting, for the smoke to come out, of the rooftop with what they were going to do to my budget at economic development.
Right.
Right, and so I feel their pain. When you get your budget slashed 47% from
Yeah.
the request that you put in, right? I've been there.
Yeah.
Lower scale, we didn't have as many tools and as much resources.
But isn't that a reaction, all of this, isn't this a reaction from the lack of performance? And I understand short-term versus long-term, but there's some basic milestones of, okay, does the tourism make sense? That was a big rollout, fairly unsuccessful, it was a national and global embarrassment.
Right.
I mean, I think we have a slideshow of the humiliation that went around the world. So that begins to lose, trigger some loss in confidence. I think, whether you think the GEs and the Johnson & Johnsons are good deals or bad deals, they certainly aren't. This is the first month, May was the first month in 3 months to have any positive job growth for the state of Rhode Island. And so you have to face that there's some real political realities. Listen, we gave you hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right.
You got to make some of this go.
Right, so part of this is, it's always been, and I know when I was there, it was an easy target.
Yeah.
Right, because we talked before, it's a long-term game. You got to do some things to change the conditions that don't happen in a 1, 2, 3 year period.
Right.
Right, so, to claim at, 3 years in, we have to stop doing everything that
Right.
we've done, I think is premature.
Yep.
I can debate, and I have some sympathy for the argument of the mix of the tools and how much incentives and all of that stuff. But I will tell you, when you get half of the budget, decimated, it's your first issue that really matters. Have we created confidence, and can we work across the executive branch and the legislative branch to say, this is our economy, this is what we need to do to transform it, these are the kinds of policies and strategies and programs that line up with that, so that we can build confidence to be able to invest taxpayer dollars. And I agree with the first part of your question, that there's always been a confidence problem. Right? But we don't help each other up there, on the Hill, and it's the first place we go to look for resources.
Right.
I kind of like that the governor, when I'm sure she was pushed, made the trade-off to supporting community college, right, versus continue, to lay on the tracks for the incentives. Whether she could have won that or not,
Yeah.
I'm guessing. I don't know, but I'm guessing they forced her to decide.
Yes, I
right.
believe that
And
is
she and I support the decision she made, because community college is a linchpin.
Yeah.
Gotta be there, and programs that kind of strengthen that are good. The incentive programs, the jury's still out, right? We've made some bets. Let's see if they play
Yeah.
out. But now you got to dig back out of that hole to convince them that with confidence that you can be investing in economic development. So we keep taking a step forward, 2 steps back, a step forward, 2 steps back. I understand there were constraints in total funds that were available, but boy, they didn't just get a haircut. They got scalped.
They got scalped. Just to wrap up, I do want to be on the record. Saul was right. I was wrong on the Uber predictions, so it is now
A
memorialized
blind
forever.
squirrel,
Yeah.
right? That guy finds an every once
Thank
in a
you
while.
as always. Countdown to BIF. Any big announcements
Oh
this week?
man, we are cruising right now. I don't
Is
know.
Bezos coming in?
For football.
Have you had Bezos?
We have tried to get Jeff Bezos because he's done so many of these kinds of things.
Yeah.
His story is so compelling.
Oh, yeah.
And the results now kind of back it up. No, but
This is a company, but by the way,
Yeah.
didn't make any money for a really, really long time.
and all of his stakeholders stuck with him and
Yeah.
still stick with him,
Yeah.
which is a testament
Right.
to this man.
Was
and
it
the
2
leadership
years ago?
team.
Was the first time they made money?
No, they purposely avoided profit. Like, we don't want profit because we want to invest in this game that we can own. On the summit, a lot of football fans in our audience here. So Joe Andruzzi, the Super Bowl
Yeah.
champion, 3 Super Bowl rings, that many who know his story, got faced with the personal tragedy of being diagnosed with cancer, and has now been 10 years cancer-free.
Yeah, that's right.
And he's going to be on the BIF Summit stage, September
That's great.
13th and 14th. What does it mean to go from identifying as an NFL champion, worked the hard way to get to the Patriots wins and wears those Super Bowl rings proudly,
Yeah.
to the day he learned that he was diagnosed with cancer, and he shares the compelling story about what it was like, and now they run a foundation
Right.
that's trying to help other families. So it's the kind of story we love. Someone who's reinvented himself and got forced to do it and has done it with dignity and grace and is making a big difference in the community.
Great. Can't wait. Thanks as